Welcome to Legal Lines. My name is Tom O'Shea, the host of this program that is brought to you by the York County Bar Foundation. Today my guest is Ben Hooper. Ben is the managing attorney of the York office of Mid-Penn Legal Services, and tonight's subject will be Mid-Penn Legal Services. So welcome, Ben.
Tom, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I want to note for everyone that this is my disclaimer, I am on the board of Mid-Penn Legal Services, which is a nonprofit organization that supports the programs at Mid-Penn Legal Services, and it exists in, I believe, 18 counties. Am I right on that?
Exactly right, in central Pennsylvania.
And various counties have their own home office, and Ben's in charge of the York office. So thank you, Ben, and let's start out with a very basic question. What is Mid-Penn Legal Services?
Okay, well, what we do is we're the legal aid provider for low-income individuals in York County. The latest numbers that we have indicate that about 40,000 people in the county are eligible for our services. And we determine that based on the federal poverty guidelines. If you're below 125% of poverty adjusted for household size, you're eligible for our services. And what we're doing is providing civil legal aid, non-criminal.
Okay, that's what I want to point out to begin with. When you say civil legal aid, non-criminal, in other words, you'll handle cases that are civil in nature as opposed to criminal cases.
Right. We exist because you don't have a right to counsel even if you're not able to afford one in a civil matter. Everybody knows by heart watching television the Miranda warning, and if you can't afford a lawyer, one will be appointed for you. And that's the case if you're facing jail time, if it's a criminal matter. There's a famous case, civil, well, excuse me, I was going to say Gideon v. Wainwright established that you are entitled to have an attorney before you're put in prison. But you can have serious civil rights at stake. You can be evicted from your home. You can have benefits that you've paid into, that you're entitled to, taken away. And you don't have that corresponding right in civil matters to have an attorney help you.
So to make it clear with civil matters are lawsuits where it's one individual against another individual, or a corporation against an individual.
Or the government.
Or the government is basically not trying to punish somebody by putting them in jail or giving them a fine, but trying to take some action that could impact a person financially or their family in some way. Is that a fair way to say it?
Of course, and with disputes between individuals or the government and an individual, often resources pretty lopsided. And to be totally candid, we see this in court all the time. Our legal system just doesn't function very well when only one side to a dispute has access to counsel.
Okay. So basically what you're doing is providing a service to low-income people. Is that fair to say?
That's exactly right.
So that they can be represented by an attorney in a civil matter, even though there isn't a constitutional right to this.
Correct.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that there's about 40,000 people in York County who are eligible to use your service. Obviously, you cannot service all those people.
And if everybody needed their lawyer all at once, we'd have a big problem. We don't have unlimited resources. It's the opposite.
Can you briefly tell us what your resources in York County are?
Sure. In addition to being the office manager, I have my own caseload as well. I count myself about a half. And in addition to me, there are 3 other attorneys in the office and 1 case-handling paralegal. So if you're doing the quick math, that's 5 people, 5 advocates for 40,000. What that means is we have to triage. We're really picking our spots. There are far more people that experience serious civil legal problems than we're able to represent in court.
Now, when you say that you have to triage, can you tell us how that's done?
What we're trying to do is take on cases that affect the most important basic rights. So things like shelter, I mentioned before, you can be evicted from your home. Evictions are cases that we try to do. The biggest unmet civil legal need for low-income people is in family law. Family problems everybody understands, so child custody. And an example there, since there's way more, again, custody cases than we can take on, types of cases that we'll do are the most the most egregious. Things like another parent of a child may not even know their children, and they pick them up from school or daycare and take them away. We call those child snatch cases. It's important, and we talked about this before we started the program. I don't want to unrealistically raise expectations in the public of how much we can take on. So that's a good example of the type of custody matter that we'll represent.
So in other words, what you're saying in the custody realm, child custody realm, is that a low-income person might not be able to have a Mid-Penn Legal Services attorney handle the case if the issue does not appear to be of an urgent need. Is that a fair way to say it?
We can only take about 40% of the cases that come to us. And of those 40%, we're not able to provide full-blown representation in court for a lot of those. Within the 40%, I'm counting instances where all we're able to do is provide advice. So that's exactly right.
Well, if I could stay on the type of cases that, you gave an example of basically an urgent need in a custody case. When you mention family law, the first thing that comes to my mind is divorce. Do you handle divorce cases?
We do very limited divorce service right now. We're putting on a workshop about once a year. We have a wait list, and we take on divorce cases where the parties have been, we're just talking about uncontested, where the parties have been separated for 2 years and both the parties are living in York County. And that's a good time to point out, we have the 5 advocates in the Mid-Penn office. We also partner with the Bar Association. Private attorneys donate some of their time to do pro bono work, which means they represent cases, clients, without charging a fee. That's how it works with divorce. We're able to provide divorce service because private attorneys take those cases.
So let's talk about the pro bono program, okay? Most members, not all, but most members of the York County Bar Association are willing to handle so many pro bono cases where they will represent a low-income person without charging a fee. And your office, as I understand it, screens those cases or determines who's eligible to come to one of the pro bono attorneys?
Exactly right. It's the same urgent cases, evictions, the example of a custody case I was talking about before, the snatch. Private attorneys are helping low-income people with really desperate situations. We screen them with one exception that I should mention. Some folks present a conflict for our office. If we can't represent a party due to conflict, often because we represent the other side, say it's a custody case, so we refer those cases to the pro bono program, and we explain to the private attorneys who volunteer to take those that because it's a conflict, we didn't screen this one. You need to do the merit screening.
A conflict would be, for example, if you were representing mom in a custody case and dad also qualified for your services, it would be a conflict for you to also represent dad.
Correct.
So that would have to be referred out, and if there was no income for dad in that case to pay private counsel and he qualified for Mid-Penn Legal Services, a private attorney would take the case without charging a fee.
It's unfortunate, Tom, but there are some communities where for conflicts there's no service available. So it's nice that we utilize the pro bono program to be able to be more
And to
fair.
put in a plug for the attorneys in York County who are members of the Bar Association, I believe most do agree to take pro bono cases each year.
And attorneys who don't tend to help us otherwise by paying an opt-out fee. The Bar Association asks members to take 2 cases a year. It's in our canons that this is work that lawyers are supposed to do to contribute to the community. Some attorneys have a practice where they're not doing the types of cases we are, and we'll talk more about that, I'm sure. Okay. But for example, if an attorney just does transactional stuff,
a corporate attorney,
right, that doesn't come up with
people who need a corporate attorney who meet the income criteria to qualify for legal services. So a corporate attorney might not feel qualified to help someone in a landlord-tenant dispute, for example.
That's a great example. And many attorneys in that situation, if they don't feel they can participate in our pro bono program, they contribute money to
which gets me to something else I want to touch on, is how is Mid-Penn Legal Services funded?
Our biggest source is government funding. We get funding from the Legal Services Corporation. We also get funding from the state government. There's a filing fee surcharge that helps fund legal services. There's also a line item and Title 20 money coming from the state. But what's happening, what we're seeing particularly in the last 2 years, is that funding's been shrinking dramatically. Last year, our federal funding got cut very close to 15%. What that means for York County is about $40,000, and that's a huge portion of our funding.
And are there programs being put into place to try to make up that funding?
I had the pleasure of giving out pro bono awards, and I was mentioning to the whole Bar Association that what's really happened is local money has materialized to help make up some of that difference. The York Bar Foundation, which is, as you know from serving as I was past president of the foundation, and the foundation sponsors this program, so we can put in the plugs there. Let's put in a plug there, the charitable arm of the Bar Association. Recent years, they've contributed $40,000 to Mid-Penn Legal Services, in addition to contributing to fund the family law attorney in York County. So this is money that the members of the bar donate to help fund Mid-Penn Legal Services, in addition to the time that the attorneys who handle the pro bono cases. I don't mean to sound like Pollyanna here and all happy and positive, but it's tremendous what lawyers do in York County. They take cases, they contribute money through the Bar Foundation, sometimes just individually, and that's not all they do when the United Way campaign comes around. Often folks donate to Mid-Penn through the United Way campaign. And Mid-Penn is one of the agencies that's funded through United Way? We've been a partner agency, and similarly, just like the Bar Foundation, the United Way has increased their funding to us in the last 2 years significantly. So, it's doubled, basically. Although the government's role of funding has declined to some extent, a significant amount, we are looking at other ways to help fund your program, including donations to the program. It's really that when our traditionally our more stable sources of funding from the federal and state governments had helped us out before, but now that's going away, and our friends in the community have stepped up to a large extent to replace it. Thank you, Ben. We're almost out of time in the first segment. In the second segment, we'll talk more about cases that Mid-Penn Legal Services can handle and how to qualify for their services. My name is Tom O'Shea, and this is Legal Lines. Welcome back to Legal Lines. Today my guest is Ben Hooper, the managing attorney of the York office of Mid-Penn Legal Services. Our topic is Mid-Penn Legal Services, what types of cases they handle, who qualifies for their services. And to summarize what we covered in the first half of the program is Mid-Penn Legal Services provides legal services at no cost to low-income people for civil cases. They do not handle any type of criminal cases, but they handle a wide variety of civil cases. And let's talk a little bit about what types of civil cases typically are handled by Mid-Penn Legal Services attorneys. Well, that's excellent. And we already talked about in the first half, the biggest unmet civil legal need is in family law. Of the different types of family law cases, We do child custody, and we do protection from abuse, the name for domestic violence cases in Pennsylvania, because those are we've deemed to be the most significant issues for different reasons, and it's resources right now. We're not able to provide representation in child support, and we're extremely limited in what we can offer in divorce.
Okay, so that's the family law realm, but you handle many cases other than family law, correct?
We do, and I should mention, I'll just say this in family law, if it's a domestic violence case, we take on those cases without regard to income, on the rationale that if a client's fleeing a domestic violence situation, they may not be in a position to access resources. So we're primarily a low-income office, but we do domestic violence cases without regard to income. Housing is the second biggest need, and there primarily the cases that we can take are eviction cases. If you have a security deposit question, if another tenant is bothering you, we can maybe give you some advice or point you in the right direction. But it's mostly evictions. One area is self-help measures, where a private landlord typically may take the law into their own hands and instead of going to court and evicting the tenant the right way, change the locks or cut off the utilities. These are high priority cases for us. Mobile home cases are high priority because there, in addition to all the difficulty of having to move and find a new place to live, cases where the clients own the home but they just rent the lot space, you get evicted from the park. It's
you have to
depending on the age of the home, right? And it's that often is impossible.
Okay, so family law is the number one category. Number two is housing.
That's right. Sometimes we call these consumer cases, but also in housing. Certainly in recent years, we've seen a lot of mortgage foreclosure cases, and we do those. In the parody of the Barstool show, it was pointed out actually that York County had at one point a couple of years ago one of the highest foreclosure rates in the nation.
And that's a serious problem for many people. And so somebody who owns a home, they could still meet the income criteria for Mid-Penn Legal Services and perhaps qualify to have one of your attorneys handle a foreclosure action from the side of the homeowner.
That's right. Some people can. Some people do qualify.
Okay, and you've had a large number of those cases, I take it, over the last few years.
We have, and we also partnered with the Pennsylvania Legal Aid Network and the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Administration to participate in a special program which didn't have an income restriction. That was called the Foreclosure Mitigation Counseling Initiative, and through that project, irrespective of income, we were able to just give advice to people before it got to the foreclosure complaint.
Okay. And if you could briefly tell us the other types of cases, because I know we're not limited just housing cases and family law cases with what you provide.
So let's touch on the other big areas. Benefits cases.
Benefits would be like...
A government benefit to cash assistance or food or what's become one of the most important, medical.
How about unemployment compensation?
That's an insurance benefit that people pay for and are entitled to.
But that's the type of case you handle.
That's the biggest benefit case. That's the biggest category that we take on. And again, just like mortgage foreclosures, when the
economy's bad, you have more cases.
We've done a lot more.
And when the economy's bad, you have more cases, more people who qualify for your services.
That's exactly right.
And when the economy's bad, the government stops a lot of the funding that goes to pay for your office to run.
It's ironic, but it's a bad cycle and it's not good. And yes, we have had plenty to do in recent years. Let me also touch on in consumer, we do a little bit of bankruptcy work. If bankruptcy can be an effective remedy to help people preserve essential property, like the home, sometimes that comes up in mortgage foreclosure cases. or if there's a sheriff sale scheduled, and we can protect a car, for example, that helps a person get to work or get to medical appointments. What am I leaving out? Other than unemployment insurance, we do just a little bit of employment law cases. They tend to focus on removing barriers to employment. So there's a process where if you have not a conviction but an arrest, and that's become a problem, a barrier to getting a job, that arrest record can be expunged. Our attorney who does those had a case that was chronicled in the Daily Record a couple months ago, and that was a great success, where the woman had nothing to do with, she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, but was charged with, it was a murder case. She had nothing to do with it, and that was an impediment for her to get work. Driver's licenses is another big one too, if we can help somebody get a driver's license back.
Okay. Let's go through the process. If someone believes they qualify for your services, they have a civil claim, they're involved in some type of civil lawsuit, civil dispute, they need to come to you for your services.
Yes.
How do they go about doing this?
They can call us, and I wanted to mention on February 20th, our number is going to change for new cases. If you're not a current client, we're beginning a coordinated intake, and that number to call if you think you may be eligible and have the type of civil case that we do is 1-800-326-9177. Of course, we'll continue to have our local office number, which is 717-232-0581. If you're not a current client, calling is the best way to start the process. We do what we call an intake to determine that you're eligible.
So the number you just gave, the new number, is the intake number, or the intake telephone number?
That's right, and that's as of February 20th.
Okay.
So if you're watching this before February 20th, it's the local 717 number, but after February 20th, please start using the 800 number.
And there would be someone who answers the phone and gathers what, financial information to see if someone's eligible?
We do that in the beginning. That's right, because our funders require it. We have some other more, other eligibility things we have to look into that we don't have to get into now, but your citizenship status is something we need to check on for most types of cases, other than the domestic violence. We do ask about assets for certain types of cases as well. That process doesn't take very long.
So then if someone goes through the process on income eligibility, then is the next issue the triage that you talked about before as to what you can do or cannot do because of the lack of manpower, if you will, to handle all the cases.
That's exactly right. We'll figure out you're eligible, and then we'll figure out what your problem is. It's something we do and how we can help, to what extent. What'll be wonderful about the coordinated intake starting February 20th is that in many instances, you'll have an opportunity to speak to a lawyer right there when you call in the first instance. So for example, if it's a security deposit issue, we may get you to be able to speak to a lawyer right there when you call to get the advice and information.
Okay, and other times you might need to make an appointment to meet with the client.
That's right.
And your office is located where?
At 29 North Queen Street, and that's certainly another way to access services. You can come directly to the office.
That's in downtown York.
Correct. I'm sorry. You're right. 29 North Queen in York.
And that's where your office is, as well as the other attorneys who work for Mid-Penn in the York office.
That's right.
Okay. And there's only one office in York County, and that's where it is.
That's right.
Okay.
Right.
So. And you also mentioned previously that sometimes other attorneys will volunteer to take your overflow, if you will.
That's right. Through the pro bono program, what we're trying to do is use different delivery models to provide some service to people, to everyone who has a serious civil legal problem. Of course, what's most ideal and what we aspire to with sufficient funding is to be able to provide direct representation to everybody, have a lawyer in the hearing, regardless
Right.
of what kind of case it is. If we don't have the resources to do that, a good example is in child custody. In the first half, I talked about the snatch example, where that's one where you need a lawyer to help you all the way through the court action. But if it's something short of that situation, we partner with private attorneys through the pro bono program to put on workshops. And this is a self-representation workshop where eligible clients attend the workshop. They meet one-on-one with an attorney. You've done this yourself.
I've done it. That's right.
And that helps.
But
gets
the
people
idea
prepared
there
to,
is that if it's something relatively simple, the attorney will teach them how to fill out the right forms, how to file it at the courthouse, and then technically go into the court by themselves if they don't get an agreement, or hopefully if they reach an agreement, how to get the agreement with the other side signed and submitted to the court, so that, for example, in the custody workshop, they would then have a custody order by agreement that both sides would be legally bound to follow.
That's right. And as you well know, in many instances, that's sufficient. So many custody cases don't have to have a full-blown trial. They can get resolved in what's called a custody conciliation conference.
And just to make it real clear, there are very high filing fees for most people for a custody order or for other types of cases through the court system. Generally, if someone is going to qualify for Mid-Penn Legal Services, the fees, not always, but generally can be waived.
That's right. That's
And
correct.
there's a process to go through to do that, and typically in these workshops, the attorneys will help the people go through that process.
Correct.
Okay, we're almost out of time, Ben. Thank you very much for being here on Legal Lines. The program is Legal Lines. My name is Tom O'Shea. This program is brought to you by the York County Bar Foundation.